Now. Great. And I'll do a little brief introduction here for Sree, and Sree, then you can take over, talk a little bit more, maybe anything that I missed, and then we can dive into some of the questions and I'll talk about the format as well. So everyone, this is Sree Sreenivasan. He is a graduate of Columbia Journalism School and co-founder of Digimentors, which is a social, digital, and virtual events consultancy. He has held notable positions as Chief Digital Officer for the City of New York, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Columbia University, focusing on the future of cities, culture, and education. And you may also recognize him from some of his TEDx education talks on attention as currency and the difference between digital natives and digital immigrants. So we are pleased to have Sree with us today. Sree, if you want to share a few words before we dive in.
Sure. Thank you so much. I am delighted to be with all of you, and anything for Shanti Bhavan. I have known the George family for 25 plus years, and they are among the most generous, most active, most energetic, most dynamic people I know. And they've done so much for India, for so much for Indian-American relations, for just so much good in the world. And I think we should all salute them for all their good work, and all of you, by being part of the extended family, are representatives of that legacy. And I am just thrilled that I can be with you today.
Amazing. Thank you, Sree. And just a few housekeeping items. I would encourage you, if you're able to, just have your camera on. We'd love to see your face. I know it's a smaller group this time around, so it'd be wonderful to see you. And then once we kind of dive into some of the questions, we'd love to open the format. So if you're finding that one of the topics or questions that we're discussing is particularly interesting and you just want to have a question you want to dive in, please feel free to pop it in the chat, turn your video on, kind of wave, and we'll make sure that we pause and take your question. So if anybody doesn't have any questions, we'll go ahead and move right in.
And I also just say that there were two other connections to Shanti Bhavan. One is that my daughter, Durga Srinivasan, spent a summer of 2023 on campus as a summer fellow, I guess, and she just had the best time. And my father visited the camp, and about 25 years ago, 20 plus years ago, Dr. George and I worked on setting up the Indian Institute of Journalism and New Media. And so I saw firsthand how he builds institutions and what he's been able to do. So that's another connection.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sree. We'll start off, maybe talking in a little bit about the shifts in media consumption. As a professor of journalism at Columbia University, and you've written as well for the New York Times since I think the 1990s, you've been able to observe firsthand the landscape change dramatically in the last 30 years. What do you feel are the most radical or profound changes in how news is produced and delivered? And do you think these changes are mostly positive or negative?
Oh, you started me off with a tough question. I like that. We have, the world has changed so much, right? As you said, it's not just the media world that has changed, it's the world itself. It's the way people connect, the way people communicate, the way people reach out to each other. And I'll try to explain this through looking at my own experience as a journalist, but even before that, as an Indian child growing up overseas. I was born in Japan, by the way. My father was an Indian diplomat, and he had no problem picking me out the window at the hospital because he said, the brown one is mine, and was able to find me in Tokyo very easily. And we lived in a world where getting news from home was very difficult. This was before CNN, before international news was so available. We used to rely on radio to understand the world and all of that. And to talk to your family at home was very difficult back in India. before WhatsApp changed everything. And we even had a strange relationship with our phones because there was a telephone in the house. And when it rang in the middle of the night, it was always bad news from India because that's how we were trained that if the phone rings at night, it means it's bad. And that's how kind of we grew up. And the phone was something that uh, you were it was an important part of your life, but not the way it is now. It's not something that you carry with you everywhere. It's not the first thing you touch in the morning, the last thing you touch it. It was just a different experiences. There weren't in a home of four people, four phones. Or if somebody's working, they may have two phones, right? And that landline has gone away. And so that's just one example. But even that journey was complicated to get to WhatsApp, where we have unlimited free phone calls internationally. Uh, they there was a moment in between where we had calling cards to call India and to talk to family members, and it was it went from being $3 a minute to talk to India to zero, as you know now. With the calling cards, it went down to $1 a minute. But just think if you have to pay $3 every time you WhatsApp, you would really think about using your WhatsApp, right? So there was a sense of like deliberation and care and strategy on how you communicated. A lot of it was because you're trying to save money. A lot of it was trying to save the other person's time and money, right? There were all these other factors, which now it's just like free for all. One way it was a good thing is that with my children who are in college now, I sort of have to make appointments to talk to them, right? I have to text them in advance and then say, can you talk to me? My mother would just pick up WhatsApp and just call them anytime, day or night, not care. And they would always take her phone, but not my calls, but they would take it. And she would you do kind of the standard like senior citizen in India. She would like be on the phone like this. So you'd be seeing like her face up like this. And she didn't care about any of that. The kids didn't care. They were just so happy to have that connection, which I couldn't have when I was not in India. When I was in India, I could have that. But so that was just one way. And you might say, wait a minute, Sree, why are you talking so much about phones when we're talking about media? Well, what's happened is that there isn't a distinction anymore, right? There was a time where the content creators were the journalists, were the media professionals. Now everyone's a content creator. Everyone can post, everyone can share. That's great and bad at the same time. So the way I got news about India as a kid was we would have a weekly newspaper that would come, that would be delivered in the diplomatic pouch that would come from India like a week late. So we'd get that. And then the Hindu newspaper from Chennai had a weekly newspaper that they would sell overseas. So we would get that and we get a little bit of information. And to go from there to today, where I can get information in real time about India, just as everybody else in India can, is so exciting and also so confusing, by the way, when you turn on Indian television with 10 people screaming at each other in multiple languages with so many things going on around the screen. I can't blame Indians for that. It started in America with three people screaming at each other, and Indians just kind of one-upped it in a really big way. And so all of these changes have meant different changes in how people get their information, how they create information, how they share information. And a final thought on this is the idea that just about 25 years ago, they used to say India had about 3% of India had phones. 3% of India had phones. And economists and others would project and say, one day, maybe with great luck, 10% of India would have phones. And because they were thinking about landlines and everything else, they didn't see the revolution. They didn't see the evolution. They didn't see the amazing changes to come. So we've gone from where everyone predicted maximum 10% of India would have phones to everybody in India has phones. And some people have two or three phones and they're juggling things and all of that. So that dramatic change has affected how news is created, how it's consumed, and how people understand the world around them.
No, that's fascinating, Sri. And I think, like you said earlier too, the whole concept of everyone is a content creator, right? And so we're all now we all have the power, and it's ubiquitous to see someone with a phone, and anywhere you go, no matter if you're in a underdeveloped or developing country, or whatnot. It always fascinates me. There's a stark difference between sometimes where their settings and their living conditions are, but there's a phone there. So it's pretty, like you said, it was quite a revolution. One thing I wanted to dive into more is the concept of digital native versus digital immigrant. And in some ways, our students at Shanti Bhavan are digital immigrants. you know you didn't grow up with a lot of technology like you shared, and then even our campus prides itself on like a no cell phone policy, and we even limit the time that the kids spent on the computers outside of what's coding classes and research. That said, they're still a part of a generation that is made up of digital natives. Their generation all grew up with phones, and so they're going to have to navigate this landscape. What do you think are the pros and cons of having full access to social media, 24-hour news, and every other corner of the internet, um, early versus later in life, as is the case for our students?
Yeah, so just if I can just dive in a little bit about that, the concepts. It's something that we hear all the time, especially in the US. There's digital natives, digital immigrants. So the digital immigrant is someone like me who wasn't born with technology, and so I migrated to the land of technology. And the digital natives are my children who were born with it. In India, it's a little different because the technology all came sort of at the same time. There were people my age who were digital immigrants, but so were people in their 20s, because they would have, in America, they would have been digital natives, but they were digital immigrants. So it's a little different, but the same principle. So today you have a grandmother who's a digital immigrant and a grandson who's a digital native in India as well. So that's now one of the great things that has happened with all of this. You all know, I hope you all know the name Thomas Friedman, the New York Times columnist who's won all these awards, who's written multiple times about Shanti Bhavan, who has done a documentary where he featured that famous typing test where he was going against one of your 8-year-olds and she beat him in this typing test. I think it was in 2005, 6, 7, something like that. I don't know if these are things that you show your students, but they should. But anyway, Tom Friedman's a name you should know. He wrote a book famously called The World is Flat. And he was talking about how communications, timing, everything has changed because it's just become easier to connect with the world. Well, one of the things that's flattened also is the differences between developed countries and developing countries. And you folks are at that forefront as young people today, where the gap in knowledge, the gap in technology, the gap in resources is falling every day. And there are many things that India does so much better, just when you talk about technology, than the US. For example, I remember one of my friends from Mumbai coming to New York. He paid for lunch and he immediately got a text, an SMS from his Indian credit card company saying he had spent $15 for lunch. And I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And they had that. Now I get it that, but I get that like 8 years later. You already had it. Things like the way you use texting, the way you use QR codes, all of that are way ahead of India. When I used to go to India, I would try to get Indians to use a piece of technology that Americans love and Indians don't love or never used. And that was voicemail. Like you don't get somebody, you leave them a voicemail. And my Indian friends would say, wait a minute, we don't need that. We have much better technology, missed call technology, right? Where you basically just leave a missed call. And I say, but that's not enough. I want you to know who's calling. It says who's calling. I want you to know why I'm calling. I don't care. So that was so interesting that so then I brought that back to America and started telling people, don't leave me voicemails. Just I just know that you called. So anyway, all of this is to say that these differences are important. And back to the natives and the immigrants, what we are able to do as when we work with digital natives is that they have a wonderful sense of fearlessness about technology. They can go out and do anything because they trust that the computer can do anything. So in a sense, I compare this to being citizens of a country, right? So you're citizens of India, you're born in it, you know its rights, you just feel a sense of ownership. Whereas if there was a foreigner who moves to India, they're immigrating to India. They don't know everything, so they will read the Constitution. They will read books about India. They will read about the history of India in a way that someone who's born there doesn't need to, right? Because you have that sense of it. So same way, while a lot of businesses and everybody wants to hire digital natives, I find that digital immigrants, same way, they will read a manual. They will ask questions. There'll be some uncertainty, some skepticism that the digital natives don't have. So the case that I was making in this TEDx that anybody can find was that digital immigrants are also important. And let's not just chase the digital natives. Now, the graduates of Shanti Bhavan are digital natives, and I'm an old man. So this is a little self-serving to me. I was speaking up for my old people, wanting them to get jobs also. So I will admit that.
That's great. No, and I actually like that concept. Like you said, it's the willingness to learn. Sometimes when you take things for granted, and you've kind of seen it all your life, and you assume that people know, and that assumption can, take us, down bad paths. We have to give everyone a chance. So I do agree with you on that. Any questions or anything, any thoughts from anyone in the call here before I go on to the next question? All right.
What I would love is if in the chat, people want to just introduce themselves if they're shy about coming on screen.
Yes,
Tell us
yes.
who you are, where you're watching from, what you're doing these days. All of that, I'd love to hear it. And it's all no pressure, but just the chance to chat. And I really want to be as helpful as possible.
Yes, yes. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah.
Um, Hi Jessica, hi Sree. This is Nivya, and I'm from the third batch. Sree, I just wanted to add that I heard that you were just talking about Thomas Friedman.
Yeah.
So I was there in school at that point, and he did the typing test with my classmate Sarita. And we also had his daughter, Thomas Friedman's daughter, in school volunteering, Ollie Friedman. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in.
Oh, what a beautiful thing. We should find video of that of Zarit. How do you spell her name? Zarita?
Sarita,
Oh, Sarita. Okay, yeah,
Sarita.
yeah. So sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we should definitely find that video and share it with everybody.
Yeah.
That's so great. And so what are you doing now, Nivya?
I'm working at London Stock Exchange right now.
Amazing, amazing. That's really cool.
Thanks for sharing that, Nivya. That was great. I'll have to dig up that video, see if I can find it. Great. Any other thoughts from anyone here on that part? It's really interesting, and we can probably talk about that for another hour. But okay, great. Well, another TEDx talk that I mentioned earlier in your bio is the attention is currency, and that I think, I mean, we can talk about that. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about the human attention. Now human attention is our most significant currency. We can argue for that. Can you talk a little bit more about what you think about that, your thoughts on that, and maybe even in what ways has our inability to give undivided attention hindered or hurt journalism specifically?
Yeah, I mean, everything is about getting and growing attention. I have this idea that the scarcest resource in the world is human attention in the 21st century. And if you want to succeed, to know how to get attention, grow attention, keep the attention of your audience. This particular group, no matter the size, we have to keep them engaged. Otherwise, they're going to move on to other things because there's so much to do, right? And if you're Shanti Bhavan, you want to attract great students, you want to attract great teachers, you want to attract great volunteers, you have to do that. You have to raise money. All of those things require the ability to get, keep, and grow attention. So that's one of the things I'm kind of obsessed with. And every organization has this problem. I now, so my background, as you heard very generously in the generous introduction, was that I was a professor of journalism, and then I was a chief digital officer of Columbia University. Then then I was the chief digital officer of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is a big museum in New York. And then I was chief digital officer of New York City itself. And now I run my own small social digital consulting training business, and I go around the world talking about AI. I was just in London doing those workshops. I was just in India. And what I have learned is that it's really hard to keep people's attention because there's just so many options coming at you, right? Like if you think about television in India, where there are now hundreds of channels that you can choose from, meaning you will just want to keep flipping. When I grew up, there was one channel in India, or in the US, we had like 5 channels, right? So the ability to change channels wasn't there. So there was less temptation for things that that would distract you, that would take you away from the opportunity you have. So that's something really important. And as part of my work, I was invited by the Nobel Prizes, as you know, the most important prizes in the world. Invited, though some of you may say the Oscars are more important or the Filmfare Awards are more important, but I was asked to join one of their boards. Their boards doing digital activity, marketing, and all that. And I said, look, I make a living doing this stuff, so I can't do it for free. So please hire me as a consultant. And they said, we don't do consultants, but we'll fly you to Scandinavia 3-4 times a year. So I said, okay, I'm in. But I said, why do you want me? And they said, we want more impact. And I'm like, oh my God, you're the Nobel Prizes. You want more impact? Then what about everybody else? Right? Like if you are feeling you're not having enough impact, you're feeling you don't have enough attention, then what hope does everybody else have? And so that kind of catalyzed my work to say we have to really, really work on this and do a better job of doing it.
No, that's a great insight. Like you said, it's everyone's vying for the attention of others, and marketing is completely shifted to, social media and other platforms where the people are. So no, I appreciate those thoughts. Anyone have anything here? Feel free to jump in or in the chat. I want to make sure that I pause for that. Okay. Great. All right. We're covering a lot of big topics, and here's another one: misinformation versus disinformation. And understanding, can you explain to us and help us understand the differences between these two? And then maybe talk about what it looks like in today's social media context. Is one more insidious than the other?
Sure. Some of you may have seen, we're talking just one few hours after the U.S. politics, in U.S. politics, the presidential and vice presidential candidates for the Republican Party have been announced and solidified, and that's Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, whose wife is from an Indian family, so there's a lot of attention. But that doesn't mean she doesn't represent and support and encourage some of the worst instincts in humanity by supporting the way in which her husband has made a living and been so successful in trafficking in misinformation and disinformation. He's gone already to the second highest place in America, which is to be a senator, and now he's trying to be vice president. And if he becomes vice president, he will almost surely become president in those 4 years, because there's no way Donald Trump will survive 4 more years. And this is not saying anything political, but just to say he is supported by a guy named Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, it was one of the founders of PayPal with Elon Musk. And one of the things that Peter Thiel believes is that the enemy of the kind of work that the Republicans are trying to doing, cut taxes, go against immigration, all of those things, the enemy is actually the media and the Democrats. And so get the media distracted, you flood the zone with crap. And he used even a worse word than that. And what's happening now is, and so lots of misinformation, disinformation, just flood the zone with it. And then you're just constantly spending all your time fighting off the bad stuff, that the good stuff disappears. And this is on the record that Peter Thiel has talked about this. And so we are heading to a time when all of this is going to get worse. Why? Because of AI. Because AI makes the cost of making this crap zero. With social media, you had to create the asset, the images and make the videos and then pay somebody to do it. With AI, it's all like zero. And therefore, there's going to be more crap in our ecosystem. We have seen this in India. We've seen this in elections all over the world and what it does. And I will tell you that I'm a big fan of WhatsApp and what it has done for the world, what it did for my mother to be able to talk to her grandchildren anytime she wanted. She has since passed. But I also saw WhatsApp poison her with misinformation and disinformation. I saw it turn her from someone who was just so open about the world and just being accepting of differences and all of that, and just constant hate coming through the phone, turned her a little bit from that person to someone I didn't recognize. And we had an agreement, we won't talk about politics. And we only had to keep that agreement, unfortunately, only for about 15 months. But we could not have talked politics because she was just repeating lie after lie after lie that comes out on WhatsApp. And so that's been something that I have learned firsthand. And when you ask what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation, the way I look at it is misinformation is just things that could accidentally be wrong. And I grew up in a land of misinformation, a time of misinformation. We didn't have access to check anything. So if somebody told you a fact about a celebrity, you would just believe it because there was no way to check it, right? It wouldn't be in an encyclopedia because encyclopedias were out of date. It wouldn't be in the news, so you wouldn't know that. So these stories about celebrities that we took for granted and all turned out to be false, we just knew that this was, we just didn't know. And so we just accepted. So we grew up in misinformation. Misinformation shows up when there's nothing to fact check it and correct it. And as I said, it can be accidental. It wasn't on purpose that my friend in 5th grade told me some outrageous story about a celebrity and I believed him because he was told that by somebody else. And it was a game of telephone, right? We just say it again and again to each other and the story would change. And so we were just used to it and we didn't care. And there was no consequences for that. So that's misinformation. Disinformation is where state organizations or just individuals, trolls, etc., put out disinformation, lies on purpose to muddy the waters, to change opinions, to have an impact about elections, about stock prices. That's disinformation. So misinformation and disinformation are two sides of a coin, and both can be combated only if we take great effort to fight it and to take effort. I'll give you an example. Some things that seem so stupid, but there was a recent thing that went around about a German football player who scored 3 goals in this thing said in let's say in an hour or something, right? So everybody's like, oh my God, he scored a hat trick in the thing. The actual thing was 15 minutes, which is even more amazing and totally harmless. But the fact that somebody went through the effort of lying about it to make it 1 hour, which is worse, less impressive than doing it in 15 minutes, or even it was even less than minutes, just shows you that people don't care about facts, right? And that's what we've seen. In the pandemic, the reason the pandemic did so badly in parts of India and parts of America is because of misinformation and disinformation, where people didn't take the vaccine, people didn't trust the government, people didn't trust where we're going with this, how bad this was, because we had the president of America giving both misinformation and disinformation. We had him saying this will go away very fast. Elon Musk said it would be over by April. It started in March, it would be over by April, as we know, it lasted 3 years. We had the president then saying, you can just take very poisonous materials, you can eat it, you'll be fine. Like things like that. And that, where is that misinformation? Where is disinformation? Some of it is to calm people down. Some of it is to distract them. Some of it is to lie and have a real impact on something. So that's the world we are in now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a saturation of information, and kind of mining through it all for what's real and not real is a responsibility I think we all need to take. And, I think in that landscape, what do you think young adults or any adult really could determine what is real, what is false, what is kind of our due diligence and what should be our process for that?
I think all of us have to work on it, right? People of all ages have to work on this. This is not just a problem of, people often think it's for young people or old people who are susceptible. Everybody's susceptible to it. I've been fooled by things. Long before AI, there was a video of this house where a man was standing at the top of the stairs and he had like 10 dogs who all looked the same. And they would all wait at the bottom of the stairs, and then he would say their names and they would come running up the stairs. So he would, and they were all had Kerala names. So Jijo, and then Jijo would come up, and then it would be Rahul, and then Rahul would come, like it would be this thing. And I loved it. I loved this video. And I never stopped him for 1 second to check, is this real? Are there all of these dogs? Is this at a house in India, or is this a house in America? It was doctored video of a bunch of dogs in America with all like American names that someone had overdubbed. And I, in my excitement for wanting this to be real, just shared it like foolishly, right? And there's so many examples like that. So when I say misinformation, and you'll say, well, that's harmless. Yes, it's harmless. But when you don't have that skepticism, the next time it could be something that is harmful that you also share really easily, right? So all of us need to double check, triple check, look at the photos. Like one of the old things, I wrote this in the year 2001 after 9/11, that if there's something on the internet that's too good to be true or too bad to be true, it probably is. You've all heard about these emails you might get from a Nigerian prince who wants to give you money. And I don't think those are around as much anymore, but you're like, oh my God, why not? If he found $1 million or $10 million and he wants to give me 1 million, why not? I mean, I'm that important that he would reach out to me, right? There's that little bit in the back of our heads, these things that allow that to happen. Or there's fake photographs of a German tourist who was standing on top of the World Trade Center, and you see a picture of the plane coming behind him just before it hit. So the idea was the German tourist, before the World Trade Center even opened that day, so at 8:45 in the morning, he was already up there. He had a friend who took a photo of him with the plane behind him and didn't scream, oh my God, and he stood there, took a photo, the plane hit the building, that camera fell 100 stories, survived, and somebody found it and then developed the picture, and then instead of giving it to CNN, is sending it to you, right? Like sending it to you personally to make it, because you, Jessica, deserve this. And you're like, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't I be the person that gets this? And so that's that. They prey on those feelings. And so I tell people, just double, triple check. And now with AI, you can have cloned audio, cloned video, and that it makes it so difficult. An American congressman sent his daughter $20,000 because he got a call saying, I need emergency money. Well, you know where this is going. It wasn't his daughter, but it sounded exactly like her. So that's why I tell everyone, every family needs some kind of safe word, so that if you get a call from your mother saying, I need money, your daughter, I need money, your son, I need money, your cousin, say, hey, what's the safe word? And then they won't know. And then you'll save the trouble from that.
Yes, no, I agree. I agree. It's scary. It's scarier than ever because, like you said, now it's not just deception, but it's deception, in the guise of someone you think you know or the voice of someone you know. And it's a scary world, but knowing this information and sharing this information with our loved ones is crucial for us,
They should see this part of our conversation for sure. It's like that Nigerian prince you won't believe, but your cousin you'll believe, your mother you'll believe, your aunt or uncle you'll believe, right? So as a society, we've evolved to the place where we don't believe the Nigerian prince, but we might believe somebody else. And Vijay has a question. We're going to come to you in just a second. And by the way, Vijay's Shanti Bhavan batch number 8. I love that. Working at DE Shaw, Bangalore. Awesome. Before we just go to Vijay, I'll just say one more thing about this, that there are new scams. There's a thing where you'll get a question on your text from someone saying, "Hi, John, how are you?" And then you'll write back saying, "I'm not John." And then they'll say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we talk anyway? It's so nice to meet you." And they'll send you a picture. It might be a beautiful woman, might be a really handsome man. And you'll be like, "Oh," and then you'll just start a conversation. And there are hundreds, thousands of examples of people losing their life savings from just that accidental text. In America, this thing has a name. It's called pig butchering, because what they're doing is luring in a pig, making that pig fat and happy, and then killing it. And you are the pig. So that's awful, right? That's awful imagery, but that's what it's called officially. And that's being very successful now. Why is it successful, Jessica? In part because of a problem we have in America: loneliness, lack of immediate connection, of humanity. Like our humanity is a little bit, and somebody accidentally is connecting to you, right? It's not a Nigerian prince who you don't know, but it's this person who you might have met accidentally, like you just don't know. And you're like, "Oh, she wants to talk to me." And she's very apologetic. And it might even be very specific. I had one saying, "Hi, John, when are you coming for the refrigerator repair?" So I would write back saying, "Oh, sorry, I'm not the refrigerator guy." She'd say, "Oh yeah, my refrigerator's not working." So then, just out of being a nice guy, I might say, "Okay, tell me more. What problems do you have?" And then before I know it, I've given her thousands of dollars. I don't know how, but why. But this is that world we live in, and that's a problem. Let's go to Vijay's question.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to, you were talking earlier about how your mother was getting a little influenced negatively by seeing lots of negative news on WhatsApp and other things, right? So it also reminded me of how during COVID, at some point, my mother had a similar notion, based on things she saw online and things people had forwarded, that COVID was a sham, and hospitals were just doing these things to make money, and so that's one example. And another thing is, I think all of us must have seen in some way or the other, where someone forwards you something and says that there's some free giveaway going on, and if you share it to sell like 10 like 5 groups and 5 users, then you get to claim a prize or something like that, right? And so, like, I've seen some of my relatives and like aunts, uncles, and people who are typically people who did not like people who are not literate or like didn't go through schooling, education, like falling for these things. So I just wanted to ask, what are some ways in which you try to combat that? See, for example, if it was another SB kid or someone else, right? Like, it's easy for us to critically think, and like we can explain to each other to fact check. And like if you're forwarding something, like if you're making a claim, you can ask them to cite your source and things like that. But how do you address this to like a generation or people who have not, who aren't educated or not as literate?
Sure. Thank you. And I appreciate your asking the question. And by the way, I encourage all of you in settings like this to ask questions. And in my case, you can just practice with me, because the art of asking the right question, being part of conversation, is important and useful. So everybody should do that and just practice. This is very informal, and we're all part of the family. So your point is excellent, Vijay, and I will tell you, it's not about literacy, it's not about education, because some of the most educated people are ones who fall for these things, including my mom. My mom is a college graduate, and she fell for these things. She was a diplomat's wife. She was an ambassador's wife in 8 countries, and she fell for these things. So part of it is that it's a constant, like, if when I was growing up, there were scams using letters. You get 1 letter a week, maybe. So you're not exposed to it. Here, this thing that you love and you trust, the phone, is constantly lying to you. And your guard goes down when that happens, right? So that's part of the problem. But I'll give you an example of this. Long before all of this, there were these postcard things where, and Jessica's too young for this, but you were told that if you'd get like just a postcard, and then you would say, send this postcard to 3 other people, and then they would get a lot of postcards. And it was like a weird pyramid scheme. All you got were postcards. So there was no money exchange, there was nothing like that. And if you were, and there's a true story of a lonely kid who was in a hospital, isolated might have been the 80s or 90s, 70s, who wanted postcards, or his family thought he should get postcard, and he got 1 million postcards, came from all over the world, right? But I had people who would do that, who would send postcards like that, and that evolved into these good luck letters saying, take this letter, physical letter, and send it to 5 people. Otherwise, you'll be breaking the chain of luck, and then you'll be the person who causes luck for everybody to go bad. Your family will be destroyed, etc. And then that evolved into email, and then now websites and WhatsApp and all of that. So what I would tell everybody is this idea: if it's too good to be true, someone giving you money for no reason, that's not true. And if it's too bad to be true, that what your actions are causing change in the world, you're negatively affecting your own karma and your own health and all of that because you didn't do some action, be skeptical, because that's the world we're living in now. That there are people, and people often will ask me, Sree, why do they do this? What is the point of this stuff? And the point is, some of them do it just for fun. Just to know you're causing chaos in the world is a good thing for some folks, right? Those are the trolls. There are others who are using it as an insidious kind of way to get in and then do other bad things. So, for example, people ask me, I often talk about how Facebook destroyed democracy and people say, well, give us an example of that. So an example of that would be in the 2016 election. You're an African American. You just supported President Obama, and you live to see a Black president of America, right? Very exciting. And the 2016 election has come up, and it's Obama's successor. There are 2 white people fighting it out. And you get a survey that shows 2 celebrities, right? It shows even 2 African American celebrities, and it says, who do you like better? And then you pick one, and then a few hours later you get another thing with a white celebrity and a Black celebrity, and you grew up loving this Black celebrity, you say that. So now it's sure you're Black. Now Facebook knows this. So now I'm sitting in Russia and I want to affect this election. One of the things I can do is tell all these Black voters terrible things about Hillary Clinton, about what she did. Some of it a little bit true, some of it not true at all, some of it outright lies, some of it just a tinge of history, and then you won't vote for her, right? That's how they do it. That's just one example of a million different examples of this stuff. And people, and what has happened is the ability to reach and do this at scale is what electronics have made possible, right? Here in America, we have these robocalls, which are legal, where people can call 1,000 phone numbers, 1 million phone calls can go out in a single day with a voice of Joe Biden saying, vote for me, right? That's legal, and it's allowed, and it's done. What is happening now with AI is you're going to get a call from Joe but saying, hey, everybody, it's Tuesday, it's 4 o'clock. We've already won the election. Stay home. And in America, they make it really hard to vote, right? There's so many problems and obstacles to voting. And it's also illegal. Some of you won't know this, that in some states, if I'm just a good guy in town and I see somebody standing in line 3 hours, 4 hours to vote, I just give them a bottle of water on a hot day. That's illegal. So why should I trouble myself? I just got a note from President Biden himself, called me and said I can stay home. And so in an election that's going to come down to a few thousand votes in 6 states, I'm sorry, in 6 states, this is going to have a huge impact. Some of you will be thinking, this is just another anti-Trump guy just saying all this stuff as he's just crazy. This has already happened. It happened in the primaries in America. It happened in New Hampshire. A guy sent out this exact same Biden things, no need to vote. And he was caught and he was punished. The fine was $6 million. Sounds like a lot of money. In American politics, it's nothing. It's less than nothing. So to win the presidency, the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign will be spending $1.5 billion. Billion. Imagine all the good that money could do in the world. And so to pay a fine of a few $1,000,000 to ensure you get the presidency is nothing. And you will see that at scale in this election. And you will see the impact in this election.
Got it. So I think so the reason I kind of was leaning towards the literacy and education aspect of it was like just one other example is during COVID, again, so I was in my hometown with my grandparents then. And so I was like just hanging out with a lot of the people in the village, right? And so some of them got a message on WhatsApp that says that the Prime Minister Modi has launched a scheme to help people because of COVID, like you'll get 5,000 rupees in your account, and they click on it, they fill out some form. And then what happens is they get a notification on a UPI app, like Google Pay, Phone Pay, something that when they open it, they have to enter their OTP. So actually what it does is it's asking you to send money to someone else. And so it auto-fills the recipient's details and everything. You just have to put in your bank OTP pin. And for them, like they didn't know the difference between debit and credit, right? And that's why I was leaning towards, like I saw it immediately and I was like, no, you don't need to give your pin for someone to send you money, right? And so I was able to stop that from happening.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. That made a big difference.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's the reason I was leaning towards that. But I get what you were saying. It's kind of more like systematic brainwashing. So even it doesn't matter if like smartest guy in the room can also still get affected.
And of course, what you're saying, if you literally cannot read, you cannot tell from money leaving to money coming, that's a problem, right? And that we have to acknowledge that. But the insidiousness of this is the problem, and that's what we're paying the price for, and that's what's so sad about it.
Any other thoughts or even just comments? Go ahead, Mala.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Mala. So I consider myself as a digital immigrant because I was part of the first batch of SC and we did not have yeah. So the first email ID we got was in, I think, 10th grade. So we were pretty behind, like compared to our own age group when we went to college. So I find that I also try to like defy being part of the evolution where like everyone is in technology, and I claim that I want to read books instead of being on TikTok and things like that. But I know that the world is progressing that way, and I just wanted to like understand or hear your thoughts on like what do you think is the balance, because there's no way that I could stop using, especially like for example Instagram is a great marketing tool right now. And for example, if I were to start like a small photography business, I would have to use Instagram and be like up to date with all what everyone wants to see. But sometimes I feel that we get so drawn into it that it's difficult to like draw the balance between like using it for a specific purpose and using it mindlessly. And so far, like, I liked how you spoke about the different aspects of um, digital technology, AI, but just want to understand, like, how do you draw the balance between like purposefully using digital technology and mindlessly using it?
Beautiful question, and thank you so much. And can't believe you're in the first class. That's being a pioneer is always wonderful. And you work for Arcturix. Is that how you pronounce it? Uh,
Yes,
what is it?
it's called
Yeah,
Arcturix.
Arcturix. Yeah, and this is the kind of thing where when you know something, you know how great it is. This brand is immensely successful, huge, important, works very well, all of that. What do you do for them?
I'm working as a colorist, so I make sure the colors work so they don't fade to washing, light, and so each jacket is made of different materials, like merino wool versus polyester. So the dyes come differently in each fabric. So trying to make the colors match so you get like one product in one color.
Amazing. And by the way, that's a kind of brand that in people in India won't know because we don't need it. And it's also not that, it's kind of a more specialized brand. It's not a
Yeah.
mass brand like that. So that's just so interesting, right? Like where you stand and what you see is very different depending on your point of view. And so this idea of what do we do in terms of accessing the technology? How do we use it? How do we not? I'm a big critic of Elon Musk, and I just can't stand him. And so I've been very, very critical of him. And my Twitter account has been, where I have 80,000 followers, has been inaccessible to me for more than 2 months. And if you had told me that a year ago that I wouldn't have Twitter for 2 months, I would have been like, okay, I've quit or I've been in a coma. That would be the only reason I'm not using my Twitter account. But it turns out it's actually been very good for me. I have been less obsessed, less in it every time doing things, but it also affected my business because my business relies on this, right? So I'm using IG more. I learned how to do reels. And if any of yours on Instagram, I'd love to connect with you there. Sreenet on Instagram, Sreenet on Instagram, and we should also connect on LinkedIn for sure. That's the most important network. I always say it's the most underappreciated of all the networks. So it's really about finding that balance. TikTok is full of problems, just as WhatsApp is, just as Instagram. I think Instagram is a little less drama just because of the way it
Yeah.
is.
I
But
feel too old to be on TikTok.
sorry, I'm too old to be on TikTok. Yeah.
No, I said I feel too old to be
You
on
feel too
TikTok.
old, then what about me? So I think that it's really good for your brains not to be on these things all the time, right? One of the things I tell people to do is turn off notifications on your phone, and your life will just, oh my God, you'll just have more time. You'll just be more relaxed because these are engineered, just like nicotine is engineered by cigarette companies to be addictive and to do things to your brain. Phones are exactly the same way. So if you just turn off your notification just for a week and just see just for a day, just for an hour, you will just find your life is so much better, less problems. And the other thing you can do is grayscale your phone. You all know what that is, where you can go in and just take your phone and make it black and white very easily. And so what it does is all those icons and all those beautiful colors will all just be gray. And you'll just not feel like touching your phone. It's still usable. But if you try that for a week or a day, you'll be like, oh, I'm using my phone less, much less than I was. And
Interesting.
so these are just things to think about. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, right? For work, you have to use them in some cases, or a creator, you've gotten followers, etc. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the way we're using it, the way we're addicted to it. Some of what Jessica was saying about how much technology is available on the Shanti Bhavan campus is really good because that's what they do in the Silicon Valley schools. The people who create these tools don't give their kids the same technology that everybody else does, because they know these things are evil. They know the problems of these things, right? I gave my children an iPhone at the age of 11. I have twins. Why? Because they made a PowerPoint presentation saying 90% of their friends have iPhones. They only have smart, dumb phones. They're embarrassed. They can't live. All of this stuff. So we're like, oh my God, they made a presentation. That's so great. So we gave it to them at 11. But they were still the last in their class to have it, because I know how bad this is. Now there's a movement in the US to not give a phone till 14. And I can't imagine what fights I would have had to have with my kids to wait till 14, right? So these are ways in which society changes, the way in which we change, the way in which we all have to take responsibility for our own use of this technology. What we're basically doing is giving children access to the greatest resources and knowledge bases in history, as well as the worst toilets in history. And not the front end of the toilet, but the back end of the toilet where everything is going, and it's just coming onto your lap and your face, and you just don't know what it is, right? So how do you learn that? That takes time, energy, attention, parents and children talking, parents and little children modeling good behavior, all of that. But a parent who doesn't have resources, a parent who is super busy doing 2, 3 jobs, a parent who's never been told that this phone is a bad thing, will go out of their way to give their kids the best technology, because they think that is what will get them ahead. And just looking at Mala's situation, the reason you're doing so well isn't because you had a cell phone at the age of 11. You probably had it much, much later. And you didn't even have email ID till the 10th standard, right? That all tells you, look at how successful you've been without that. So this impetus that parents have, that I want to give my children everything that I can. The Silicon Valley parents who engineer this know that it's bad for their kids, so they don't give it to them. Tim Cook famously didn't give his and niece and nephew iPads. Imagine having Tim Cook as the CEO of Apple as your uncle and not getting a free iPad from him, right? I would be like so angry at him. Bill Gates wouldn't let his children have screen time for more than 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day. Think about how much time we spend on the phone. Hours and hours and hours. Why? Because Bill Gates knows that this stuff is bad. And he was doing that 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when things were much less bad than they are now.
Yeah, so I think I find myself like fighting against technology. Like I do not want it, like I have my notifications turned off, and
Oh, good.
yeah, I need to try this grayscale trick. I haven't heard of that. That's quite interesting.
Google it and
But
look into it.
I just I think that sometimes I feel like I don't want the digital content at all, but I feel that I need to embrace it and like realize that that is a media platform. And
Yeah.
I feel like either I go like full out of it, or like I get too into it. And yeah, it's interesting to hear that. I think like most things, it'll take practice, and like I can't avoid the digital
Yeah,
evolution.
I would say there's also, I mean, you're very thoughtful about this, so that's the first step. You already turned on the notifications, that's the second step. But there's a word that I love, and that word is intentionality, right? You want to do something in the world, you have to be intentional about it. And if you're not intentional, then you won't be able um, to have that happen. Whatever it is, right? Whatever you're trying to make happen in the world, whether it's being more fit, eating healthier, going to the gym more often, right? Like today, and your body, like, and those of you who have been around and watched, been in offices or anything like that, that there's this old joke that anything good for you is anything bad for you is the stuff that you love, and anything good for you is hard, right? And so I'll give you just an example. Jessica booked this for me at 10:30 today. And because I'm not at home, I'm stuck in a hotel because my flight was canceled, Chicago, et cetera, et cetera. So I had a late night. I woke up late, and it was 9:18, and I had a 10:30 start. and I was like, I have to go to the gym. And I could have very easily just say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, right? But because of that intentionality, in part because my daughter and I have a challenge together, my daughter Durga, who was a volunteer at the school, we have a challenge that we will do this. I could have easily skipped it, right? But I went in, I did a much shorter, like I did like 25 minutes. But doing those 25 minutes is better, like a week, 25 minutes is better than a perfect 90 minutes that you don't do, right? Because it'll be zero. And life is about that. In everything you do, you're just faced with the easier option is almost always the worst option. And so the effort you have to put in, you just got to make that effort. And recently we went hiking in Peru. There's a famous place called Machu Picchu where you can hike. And I wrote an essay about it. I complained the entire way. And the thing I learned is about how much effort you have to put in to make something good happen in your life. And why I'm now a little bit healthier than before I went is because I am now doing a lot more. I use the momentum of something that nearly killed me to be a little bit healthier. Doesn't mean I don't have a long way to go, but that's what I'm doing. So I'm taking staircases more than I would otherwise. All of these little things, but how much effort it takes. So having mentioned that, I put in the link, I put in my LinkedIn, I put in my Instagram, I put in the article I wrote about climbing Machu Picchu and what I learned. But my wife Rupa, who is a strategy consultant, by the way, she's an Arjuna Award winner in rifle shooting, which you might know is the India's top sports award. She's a Rhodes Scholar, studied in Oxford, was captain of the Oxford shooting team, has 3 masters. Anyway, this woman who forced me to go on this trip, who I was so mad at, she wrote an article also, much better than mine. So I'm going to put that here also so you can see it. So mine was Sree MP for Machu Picchu, and this is going to be Rupa MP. So maybe Jessica can grab these and then share them. And she wrote about much better way about the lesson she learned dragging her family, a non-hiking family that goes hiking through 50 kilometers at 5,000 feet, 5,000-meter height, and what she learned in business and what you can do. And there's some great leadership skills in that piece. So I'd encourage you to read, and you'll get some lessons from that as well.
Thank you. I think whenever I do some big hikes, there's always this moment when I wonder, what am I doing with my life? Why am I going through this pain? And I feel like in those moments I realize, okay, this is really challenging. And then when I reach the top, I'm like, let's do this again. So I think that
mine, I'm never doing it again, by the way. People who do Machu Picchu, then Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp, some great hikes in India. I'm doing none of that. I'm going only to flat vacations where I can be flat and lie down. I'm not doing any of this. I told my wife she can take our kids, she can take our friends, but I am out. In her essay, she described somebody in her group who kept saying, why? That was me. She didn't name me in it, but I was the why when you read it. I'm the why.
Machu
So,
Picchu is on my to-do list, like wish
okay.
list of hikes.
So let me know when you do it, and I will cheer from you from here, and that'll be cool. All right, who's next? Hi, Nivya.
I think Vijay. Oh,
No, I just wanted to tell Mala that her classmate Anit, he uses a button phone, and we used to make fun of him for that when we were in college. But like we kind of understand now why he used to do that. But he has 2 phones. So on the smartphone, he has WhatsApp and everything, but primarily most of it like SMS and calling, he uses the button phone to do it. So that's something you can try as well. And we used to make fun of him for it, but now it's like cool and trendy to have those old button sets also.
I'll tell you something interesting, by the way, about my kids. When they were young, when they were in 8th, they're still young, but when they were in 8th standard, they would post things on IG. They all had closed IG. They'd post on IG, and if they didn't get 50 likes within 2 hours, they would delete the post, even though they only had 100 followers or 200 followers, all their own classmates, right? And I said, why are you doing that? Because if I get 50 likes, I would have a party. Like that's a big deal for me. Where if I could get 50 likes and I had 20,000 followers. And they said, no, this means that this is a bad post if people didn't immediately like it. And so they've grown up now. There are some people in their generation, and some of you are in their generation, who are creative people, influencers, just trying to get as best famous as possible and posting all kinds of bad things online. Whereas my kids have very few posts online. And whatever they share, they're sharing privately to other people, right? So it's a very interesting thing to see because my generation thinks that people under 21 or 25 are all just sharing everything about their lives. But my kids, at least these Americans, are very close and don't want us to post photos and things like that about them or what they're doing. Nivya, over to you.
So I wanted to ask about, from a journalistic point of view, how do you feel about opinions mattering less? Because everyone feels the need to comment on everything on social media. And do you comment on social media, whatever applications you use? That's my question.
So how would no? So what are you getting at? Like in terms of what would be the most useful thing for me to tell you?
Do you comment on social media posts or Twitter
Of
or
other people?
Instagram?
Of other people?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that, there are different roles you can play on social media, right? You can be someone who's creating, doing a lot of the posting. You can also be someone who just comments or reads the postings. Like my wife is a great listener of podcasts. And by the way, anybody has a podcast, tell her she will listen to it. And so people always say, Rupa, you're so interesting. Why don't you have a podcast? And she'll say, all right, someone has to listen to these damn podcasts. Not everybody can be a podcast creator. Someone has to be a consumer of this stuff, right? So same way, there's no shame in being just somebody who finds interesting content, comments on it, shares it, etc. There's actually a great job in the world, a role in the world of pointers, people who point to interesting content, right? Like they take their stories are not their own stories on IG or their own reels. They take other people's things and just point to it and say, this is why this is interesting, or this is a 10-minute reel, here's a 30-second version, right? Like they're pointing is a great skill. So as a journalist myself, so I was a professor, and so I taught some of India's most famous journalists, including Barkhat Dutt, who some of you may know on NDTV, who goes to the front line, goes to the wars. During COVID, she drove along the length of India to as the migrant workers went home from Mumbai for this election. She drove from Kanyakumari all the way to Kashmir, interviewing people in dhabas. She called it the dhabas of democracy, asking them questions. So there are people like that. I'm a lazy older guy, so what can I do in times of news? And what I have found is my role as a pointer, finding good resources, helping people understand what's happening, giving context, explaining things, decluttering information. So there is a role like that anybody can play in any crisis that's happening. And then there are times when you should just shut up, right? Like, so when I had Twitter, I would be constantly posting. But if there was a crisis where I have nothing to say that I can help, I would just be quiet and let good content come to the top, relevant content, right? That's how you need to think. If depending on who you are, what you think of your role in the world, and do you have anything interesting to say? When Twitter was banned in China, more than a decade ago, or maybe 15 years ago, somebody said, "Oh no, now 1.5 billion people won't know what I ate for breakfast," right? So are you posting like your breakfast? I tell people I want to hear about your breakfast. If you're a food critic, if you make incredible breakfasts, if you go to the rarest restaurants in the world and have amazing breakfasts, great. Then I want to know that. But otherwise, I don't want to know what you ate for breakfast, right? Like, so that's the way to think about it. A side note about breakfast, and Jessica may know this from traveling to India, that in India, even the smallest 3-star hotel has better free breakfast than the best 5-star hotels in the US and Canada and Europe and everything else. And that's an amazing thing about about breakfast. I don't eat breakfast because I do intermittent fasting, so I skip breakfast. But when I'm in India, I have to eat those breakfasts, and they're so good. And I might skip another meal, but I always eat breakfast.
Yeah, that homemade feel, really nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, just scanning here.
Um,
Go ahead, Sree.
Hi, Sri. Hi, Jessica. I'm Sri Shakti. I'm from the 10th batch of Shanti Bhavan, and I'm currently working at Ernst &
Good thing
Young.
you have.
Um, Thank you. I just had two things to add. So I recently came home actually for a family reunion kind of a thing, and I realized the impact that actually having phones and like just information in general was here, because there are kids who are less than 5 years old, 6 years old, who are given smartphones at a really young age. And I feel like the parents kind of go along with it because that's the only way they're able to control their kids. Like if they throwing like a temper tantrum and you just give them the phone, it's so much easier to handle it. It often makes me wonder how in the future, if we have kids one day, how the environment would be, because technology and everything is just improving as it goes. But I feel like it's I'm not one to judge but how you raise your kids, but these, even if they're scrolling through their phone, I don't think they're learning anything. It's just scrolling through information because it's entertaining, but you're not learning much from it. So it was really a shock to me because in Shanti Bhavan, I love the fact that I got the opportunity to learn how to read and write, and that I fell in love with reading books and stories. And in a way, it kind of became an addiction. So I love taking time off my phone to just read books. And I love that I still have that habit today. So it sometimes like I want to like spread the word, help others also find this, because it's such a big break from social media as well. The other thing I wanted to add was I recently came across a podcast. I love listening to podcasts as well. It was between, I think it was an Indian reporter who was invited to the podcast, and she spoke. It was very interesting because when you spoke about misinformation, disinformation, and attention here, she also brought up the fact that because now information is available to everybody, it's so hard to figure out which is true, which is false. So you have to take the extra time to make the judgment and the call to figure out, is this true? What I'm listening to, is it worth my time? But at the same time, the importance that, say, example, a news article, it could be about anything like good information, say about NASA or the healthcare system, something, or it could even be about like war that's happening in some country, anything in general. The importance that it was initially given is not the same now, because now even like a small example in Shanti Bhavan, we had this whole thing where we gave we like presented news articles and had a whole discussion about it. But now we go on Instagram or we go to shorts on YouTube, and it's like only for 2 seconds that we scroll through. The importance is just that only for 2 seconds, and then we don't think about it again. The empathy that we had, the thought process that we put into it initially is not the same now. And how I feel like the apps, social media apps, are also encouraging it, because now Instagram came up with this whole reels thing and YouTube has shorts. So I don't know which came first, because our attention span either way has gone. So I just wanted to pick that up.
Yeah, a lot of interesting points, and thank you, Shi, for bringing these up. What batch were you again?
10th batch.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about raising kids. I know most of you are far away from that, but I will say that we did a couple of things that, as I said, we were always the last to get our kids technology. And I just wrote an article on this, on the topic of what social media is doing to everybody's brains. And I'll share that link as well. And one of the things that I consider social media to be like cigarettes, that they are as bad for you, but in a different way. So I'm going to just put that link in here so you can catch that. And what I believe is that every 6 months that you can delay a child getting onto a particular platform, Snapchat, IG, TikTok, WhatsApp, whatever, you are postponing multiple years of problems problems with attention span, problems with loneliness, problems of depression, problems of body dysmorphia, problems of body image. All of that you're postponing by every 6 months that you can postpone having kids. So that's how I have been thinking. And we did a couple of things with the kids. We have a rule that no phones at the dining table, that they even follow today. You are allowed to take photographs of anything first. If you want to photograph your food, that's fine. Then you put the phone away. If there's a question that somebody asks, a fact that somebody wants to check, then we say, okay, we're just going to check a quick fact, and then you can go on Wikipedia or whatever, and you can check it. And what would happen invariably is that I would use my phone, or my wife would pick up her phone during dinner, and my kids would be like, no phones. So what we did was we recorded them complaining about us not having the phone, using our phones, so that many years later, when it came time, and then they would be touching their phones, would say, hey, we're not saying it, you are saying it. So the younger version of you is telling the older version of you to do that. So that's one trick we had. And then the other is that we moved no phones in the bedroom after dinner, right? Or 8 o'clock, whatever the time was. In the US, we eat very early, as some of you know. And so the charging stations were all in the living room and not in their bedrooms. And so I'm not saying these are some great success or that the kids turned out perfectly as a result of it, because as you know, or as you can guess, when the pandemic happened and we went from 0 screen time to unlimited screen time. And so we lost control over at some point there anyway. But I'm saying all this by the time you all have children, things will evolve, things will change. But yesterday on a plane, I was there, and as our flight was delayed, as I mentioned, and there were parents who were giving their kids iPads to watch, because that's the only way to not have your kid go crazy on this flight, right? Just screaming and all of that. And so that's just the reality. But I've noticed this also about adults. Like any airline that gives people free Wi-Fi or free movies, the entire plane is just more quiet. Everybody's on the screens watching it. And it's just, I've talked to flight attendants about it. It's just easier on a flight like that, on a flight where there's no Wi-Fi, there's no free entertainment, no movies. Then people have things to complain about and talk and go to the bathroom and all of this. There are times when I have to beg my children to go to the bathroom, or like otherwise they just sit there, right? They're just ensconced on the screen because they're quieter that way, but there are other issues about that. Vijay Kumar said there's a dangerous phase in college where my only source of news were memes and reels and shorts. I know better now. Thank you. And Vijay, one of the reasons why Mr. Musk spent $44 billion on Twitter, buying Twitter, is because he said, though he who controls the memes controls the world. And he has become the king of memes because he knows the power of that. And that's why he's doing so much damage in the world. But I'm glad you saw the light.
Well, it's very
Questions,
very
comments?
Does anyone have any other thoughts before we close out here? Any final questions, Vijay?
Just one last question, and I'll try to be quick because I know we're almost like out of time. So there's a lot of, because we're on the topic of misinformation, and that's what we last spoke about. So there's a lot of clickbait on social media, right? Like YouTube videos where the thumbnail it's like just something that draws you in, and or like the title of the video, but when you actually see it, it's not as exciting, or it's just something that has been hyped up, or it could sometimes even be completely wrong, like just a photoshopped image that's as a thumbnail. And second thing is like, so I was on a few Facebook groups recently looking for places to stay and housing groups. And then there was someone who was very obviously a scammer on the group because they were posting the same thing in multiple Facebook groups in different locations, the same images, the same text. And so I was like, let me be a good citizen here. And I went and reported it. I just reported the post, and Facebook said I got a message that Facebook would evaluate it. But what happened is they came back saying like that they didn't have enough information of probable cause to like take down the post and things like that, which I found very awkward because and weird, because it was just very obviously that person was just scammer. So I wanted to ask, do you think the onus of like regulation and monitoring should be on the like these platforms themselves? And do you think they're doing as much as they can or should be doing to prevent the spread of this misinformation? Or is it ultimately in the hands of the consumers to be smart enough about it?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. And the way that Jessica started with a tough question, we're ending towards in a tough question. So I want this to be clear about how I think about this stuff, right? That this is I have a AI workshop that I do that's anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours, and I call it my non-scary guide to AI. And in it, one of the bullet points is that AI companies will not fix the problems, because we've learned that from the social media companies. The social media companies have learned nothing in these last 10 years of all the damage they've done, the evil damage they've done in the world. And we're not just talking about America. We're talking about what happened in Sri Lanka. I was in Sri Lanka. They had at some point, Facebook had something like 5 people to monitor millions of Sri Lankans' posts, right? And Sri Lankans were begging Facebook to please give us more moderators in Sinhalese and Tamil and Sri Lankan Tamil and all of that, and they didn't hear it. In Burma, they begged for people to moderate and control what was going on there, and they wouldn't do it. And you saw the direct results of deaths and just horrible things happening because of that. So what we have to do is know that these institutions aren't going to fix these problems, and we have to do things. By the way, they have this other side of them that begs for regulation. Facebook once in a while will publish full-page ads in the New York Times that say, "Dear governments, please regulate us." But if you've ever seen these American CEOs go in front of Congress and talk to senators, the senators are supposed to be asking them questions, but these guys are running circles around them, right? If you've ever seen Zuckerberg go and speak or anything else, they don't know anything, because the tech guys know so much more about the tech than the senators. Even the senator staff and everything else is so screwed up that that's where we are today. And that's why it's so irritating, frustrating for us in this moment. So these tech companies are not going to fix the problems. And so we need to because the incentives are there. Their incentives are to continue to increase engagement as much as they can. And when you increase engagement, what's one way to increase engagement is enragement. Get people enraged, and they will be engaged. I have direct experience just this week. I had my most successful Instagram post. If you go on my IG, you'll see I posted something about a quiz show called Jeopardy, and it has got 1.5 million views and 12,000 likes or something like that. Insane numbers. As I said, if I get 50, I'm thrilled. And part of it is because in that I said something provocative. I didn't mean to. I said, in years of watching this show, I had not seen so many mistakes come together. And the fans of the show got so angry that they hate watched it, and suddenly I have so many views, right? That doesn't mean now that I have many more followers or anything. Nothing happened like that. But it just shows you. And then one of the stats that is shown by Instagram, which I didn't know because I didn't care about it, because I never had any posts like this. One of the things that they show you is how many total hours has this video been watched. So I'm going to just show you that for a second. And this one video, which has been watched by 2 million people, has been seen. Let me see if I can show you this. I'm going to view insights. And you can see here. So last time I saw it was 1.4 million. Now it's 1.5 million. And is it? Can you see this, Jessica, or is it flipped?
It's not mirrored. It's fine.
Not
Yeah.
mirrored. Okay, good. So 1.5 million, but this is the number that really upset me when I saw this. It said, if you look down here, it says watch time 10,000 hours in the world, people watch this video. It's only 30-second video. 10,000 hours. So I contributed to 10,000 hours of collective time being wasted by people. And that's just me, and I have such a small account, right? So imagine the Kim Kardashians, the Shah Rukh Khans, the Sachin Tendulkar, like all of these people posting nonstop all day long, all the influencers. That's billions of hours being just totally wasted. And that's so sad, right? We heard about the books that people could read, the connection people could make, go for dinner with your friends, cook together. Like so many beautiful things can happen. But instead, I did this. I feel guilty for this because it's so stupid that this happened. And that's where the enrage to engage happened, right? I posted something that people got mad about, and so they're hate watching it.
Yeah. Truly fascinating where we've ended up in so many ways.
Yeah.
I know we're at time now, and Sree, I don't know if there's any other final words you'd like to share before I make my closing remarks.
No, I would just say thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about something that I care so passionately about, as you can tell, and always want to be a resource for Shanti Bhavan graduates and students. So I know this is going to be circulated, and I want anyone who watches this to know they can contact me at any time. I gave my LinkedIn, my IG. I'll also give my email address so they can find me. And just mention Shanti Bhavan. That's a magical word for me. So I will always respond.
We appreciate it. We're so thankful for your time, the energy that you brought this morning and this evening for the grads there. Yeah, very insightful, very informative. I'll be sure to share all the links and your email with
So I have
Alex.
a rule, Jessica. I have a rule. I call it selfie or didn't happen.
Oh,
So I'd love.
I would love that.